Good morning everybody. In our previous class, we started a chapter of When People Rebel or the Revolution of 1857. The Revolution of 1857. So, through the ages 1757 to the 1856, English East India Company tried to control the maximum number of the territories under their control. So due to the annexation of Indian states, their implementation of their policies, most number of people in India, they were not satisfied. Due to this unsatisfaction by the people they started as a revolt in a different parts of our country. In this process, the rebel of 1857, the revolt of 1857, it came into existence, which was caused by the many of the causes were responsible for this. In previous class, we discussed about the political causes and economic causes. Today, we will start the socio-religious causes. Socio-religious causes. Yes. Socio-economic causes. Socio-religious causes. In this process, the first it was as an enactment of laws of society. In this age, Britishers they enacted a large number of the laws, such laws to modify the society, because at that time there were a large number of social evils existed in India, like polygamy, dowry system, child marriages, sati system. So Britishers they tried to modify the Indian society by enacting the new laws. In this process, they enacted a ban on sati system. Ban on sati system in 1829. This law passed by the Britishers. Through this, they ban upon the practicing of sati. Second, British racist policies. Britishers they use as a racism with the Indians. They were not preferred the Indians for the various governmental jobs, governmental posts. They prefer to the British only. They make as a discrimination. They also marked in a public places that as the dogs and Indians are not allowed. So such kind of a discrimination it increased as a anger among a large number of Indians, which expressed in the form of a rebel of 1857. Third, expansion of Christianity. In this age, by the advent of Britishers, Christianity introduced in India. The introduction of Christianity, new religion introduced, people started to opt the Christianity. And Christian missionaries, they forced the people, they given as incentives to the ordinary people that if they will change their religion, accept the Christianity, they will be benefited with the governmental jobs and property. And fourth one, it was as British education policy. Britishers, they introduced the English in Indian subcontinent in 1854 through the Wood's Dispatch. Wood's Dispatch, it was a commission called by the Britishers in 1854, which introduced as English in Indian subcontinent. This introduction of English, it considered as the direct attack over the religion and all those traditional schools of Muslims and Hindu, which basically imparting as a knowledge about the Quran in Muslim madrasas and the Gurukuls, Pathshalas, which imparting information about the Vedas. So these four were the major socio-religious causes which increased anger or dissatisfaction among the common masses, which came into existence in the form of the rebel of 1857. Now we will discuss about the next. Next is the military causes. Clear? Military causes. Military causes responsible for the outbreak of a revolt of 1857. First, it was the inferior status of Indian sepoys. Inferior status of Indian sepoys. The Indians in the army were considered much lower than the British and were not promoted to the higher ranks. Indians were only employed as sepoys and could rise till the rank of the subedar. Pay attention, till the rank of only subedar, not beyond of it. So there were no promotional avenues were given to the Indian soldiers. Promotional criteria only given to the British soldiers. That's it. Second, it was inequalities with Indian soldiers. The inequality in the sanction of rations, pay structure, and the living conditions between the British and the Indian soldiers in the barracks caused a lot of dissatisfaction among the Indian soldiers. Indian soldiers, they paid as a lesser salaries as compared to the British soldiers. Benefits were the limited given to them. Third, it was a foreign services alliance discontinued. In Indians, there was a myth among the Indians that the movement towards the foreign countries, movement beyond of the water bodies, it is not considered as a good. But the Britishers, they discontinued the foreign alliance, foreign services alliance from the such Indian soldiers which were gone towards the other European and American countries to represent the Britishers and fought a war from their side. So these three were the major three military causes which were responsible for outbreak of revolt of 1857. Now the next one is the immediate cause. The fifth cause, immediate cause. Immediate means that particular event, incident which is responsible for the beginning of the revolt. Immediate cause. Immediate cause was the greased cartridges. Greased cartridges. Greased cartridges. Only one is the subheading under this, immediate cause, greased cartridges. At that time, in the year of 1856, Britishers, they introduced the Enfield rifle. They introduced the Enfield rifle in army. Enfield rifle, as we discussed in a second chapter of the history. Enfield rifle introduced in an army. The rumor that the Enfield rifle cartridges were greased with the fat of cows and pig. So this was a rumor spread among the Indian soldiers that the cartridges, those bullets which used to fill in an Enfield rifle, these were covered with the fat of cow and pigs, created an offensive feeling among the Hindus and the Muslims, and they refused to use the new Enfield rifle. The Hindus worshipped cows and the Muslims detested pigs. The cartridges had to be bitten into before being used, and this hurt the religious sentiments of both the communities. And they thought it was a design by the British to do away with their caste and to defile them. In fact, this incident became the immediate cause for the outbreak of the revolt. So in this rejection of the use of greased cartridges, in this process the first person, it was as a Mangal Pandey. It was the Mangal Pandey who refused to use the greased cartridges. Mangal Pandey. Mangal Pandey refused to use as a greased cartridges which visualized in the form of the assassination. Britishers, they hanged the Mangal Pandey. It was the first martyr of the 1857. Through the death of the Mangal Pandey, the fire of a revolt, it spread among the other areas. Clear? Now we will move towards the next one. After this, the events. Continue the expansion of the revolt, as we discussed earlier that the causes, then the causes, after that the which is incident responsible for the outbreak of revolt of 1857. Mangal Pandey, which was the first martyr, it was belonged from the Barakpur cantonment area. In 29th March 1857, a young soldier Mangal Pandey refused to use of the Enfield rifle and greased cartridges. Because of this incident, Britishers, they hanged Mangal Pandey, and which became as the first martyr. Clear? So now the expansion of a revolt, the revolt of 1857 expanded in a different parts of a country, basically in a 5 important areas. Not the other areas, because of the limited expansion among these 5 states, It's easy task for the Britishers to suppress, to control over the rebellions. To control over the rebellions. In this process, the Delhi, it was a first city. As we discussed in a political causes, on 9th May 1857, 85 soldiers of the 3rd Cavalry at Meerut refused to obey the British officers. These soldiers were dismissed from service and sentenced to the 10 years of imprisonment. 10 years of imprisonment. The soldiers set off for the Delhi, and on their way they cut off the telegraph services, telegraph wires. On 11th May, the sepoys from the Meerut crossed the Yamuna and boats marched to the Red Fort. Here they were joined by the infantry. The rebels captured Delhi and declared the Mughal ruler Bahadur Shah Zafar II as their leader. They declare Bahadur Shah Zafar as their leader, which was resided in a Red Fort in Delhi. It was a Mughal emperor, and as we read in previous part, the ruler which ruled in Delhi, it considered as a ruler of the India, which we discussed in a Delhi Sultanate in last year. After agreeing to be the leader, Bahadur Shah II wrote letters to all chiefs and rulers of the country to come forward and organize a confederacy of Indian states to rise and fight against the British. This inspired the rebels tremendously and instilled in them the confidence, courage to fight against of the Britishers. To this, the Delhi, it took part in a revolt of 1857 under the leadership of the leader of rebellions, Bahadur Shah Zafar II. Second, it was a Kanpur. In Kanpur, the revolt was led by the Nana Sahib. So Nana Sahib, it was removed from their post on the behalf of a doctrine of lapse, as we discussed in a political causes. Nana Sahib, it was the adopted son of the last Peshwa, Bajirao II. He gathered armed forces, expelled the British garrisons from the city, and declared himself the Peshwa. He also acknowledged that he was a governor under the Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar II. He declared himself as a governor under the leadership of Bahadur Shah Zafar, because the pension which was earlier given to the Bajirao II, it was not given by the Britishers, not continued by the Britishers. They refused to given as a pension to the Nana Sahib because it was an adopted son of Bajirao II. Clear? Third one, it was a Lucknow province, Lucknow state. In Lucknow, Bijis Kader, the son of the deposed Nawab Wajid Ali Shah, he too acknowledged the superiority of the Bahadur Shah. His mother, Begum Hazrat Mahal. Begum Hazrat Mahal took part in a revolt of 1857. She was supported by peasants, sepoys, talukdars, who were inspired by the Maulvi Ahmadullah. Through the Lucknow took part in a revolt of 1857. In Jhansi, you already we discussed about the Jhansi under the doctrine of lapse. Rani Lakshmi Bai, one of the greatest leaders of the revolt, was Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi. Angered by the British annexation of her territories, she supported the rebels. The British forces, using superior weapons, captured the fort of Jhansi. Lakshmi Bai fled with rebels to join Tantya Tope. They decided to march to Gwalior. The Scindia ruler, one of the Rajput clans, Scindia rulers of Gwalior fled to Agra to be with the British. while his troops joined the forces of the Rani Lakshmibai. Lakshmibai died fighting British troops in 1858. Clear? In 1858, Rani Lakshmibai, she sacrificed her life to safeguard their territories of Jhansi from the British control. And last one, it was Bareilly. The Sepoys in Bareilly rose in revolt on 31st May. The British officers fled for their lives. The uprising was led by Khan Bahadur Khan. I repeat again, Khan Bahadur Khan, a pensioner of the British government, which earlier accepted the subsidiary alliance with the English East India Company. Khan Bahadur Khan, he guided the revolutionaries to expand towards the eastern parts of the country. These were the major areas of the expansion of revolt of 1857. After the main events of the expansion of the rebel of 1857, now the suppression of the rebellions. So here the question arises as why did the revolt fail? What were the reasons responsible for the failure of the revolt of 1857, which is also considered as the first war of independence? So what were the major reasons responsible for the failure of revolt of 1857? In this, the first reason responsible for this, it was as a largely localized character. Largely localized character. The revolt did not spread to all parts of the country. It limited in a limited number of areas, for example Delhi, Lucknow, Jhansi, Kanpur, Bareilly, Hyderabad, a limited number of areas, not expanded towards the whole of the India. So in Indian subcontinent, under the direct control of India, including the Bengal province, the Bombay presidency and the Madras presidency remained largely excluded from the rebel movements. In Bombay and Madras, which were the basically very important, economically important, in such areas, economically prosperous areas, were not took part in a revolt of 1857, which were the important centers of British trade, English East India Company's trade. The areas of Punjab, large princely states, Mysore, Travancore, Kashmir, and the states of Rajputana, they did not participate in the revolt of 1857. At that time, after the death of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the areas of Punjab, which administered by the company officials through the acceptance of subsidiary alliance by Rani Jind Kaur, these areas were not took part in a revolt of 1857. Second reason, it was as a weak leadership. The leader of a revolt of 1857, it was a Bahadur Shah Zafar Seti. So the leadership of the movement was weak. Most of the leaders were motivated by narrow personal gains. They took part in revolt to safeguard their position in their areas. For example, Lakshmibai took part in revolt of 1857 to secure their Jhansi on behalf of a doctrine of lapse. Same as Bahadur Shah Zafar, it tried to safeguard their Delhi from the control of the Britishers. Nana Sahib took part in a revolt of 1857 for their demand of a continuation of a pension, which earlier given to the Baji Rao Peshwa II. It wished to. So because of these demands, the demands of leaders, the leadership not fully practiced in rebel of 1857. Third, it was as a lack of common ideals. There was a lack of common ideals among the revolutionaries. The Hindus wanted to set up a Maratha Raj, while the Muslims wanted to receive the Mughal rule again. Instead of going for an alternative to a colonial system, most rebels wanted to go back to the past. So because of this, the common ideals were not there. Not all the leaders struggled for the freedom of a country. They struggled to safeguard their position in their areas, in their empires. Next one, it was as old and outdated weapons. The weapons used by the rebellions were outdated. They used bow, arrow and swords. But as compared to the Indian soldiers, as compared to the Indian rulers, Britishers, they used as a rifles, arms and ammunition. It's easy to them to suppress the rebellions which arise their voice in a different parts of a country. Second, next one, fifth one, secret negotiations with the British. Most of the old rulers who fought in the revolt were those who had been deprived of their territories. During the revolt itself, some of them started negotiations with the British for the restoration of their rights, in which the important were the Jats, Gorkhas. Such brave community, they made the negotiations with the British and getting as an incentives from the company. These warrior communities, they easily suppress the rebellions which caused as the failure of the revolt of 1857. Now the sixth one is lack of support from the emerging middle class. At that time the middle class was there which was not satisfied with the Britishers, but they didn't took the part in a revolt of 1857. The emerging middle class didn't support the rebels. In fact, the middle class believed that only the British could take India into the modern age, because the large number of middle class families, the source of income was the industries. They getting the jobs in an industry. That's why they were not take part in a revolt of 1857. Which these six were the major reasons which were responsible for the failure of revolt of 1857. Now the last topic of the chapter is the results. What were the results of 1857? In a discussion, the last topic is the consequences or the result. After the failure of the revolt of 1857, it caused many of the consequences, results. For example, the first one, it was the end of English East India Company. The role of English East India Company, which founded in the 16th century in England and continued their trade with India till 1857. So after that, the role of English East India Company ended, and a direct proclamation of a British Parliament, it started in India. It means that those policies earlier introduced by the English East India Company, such administrative, economic, social, religious policies, all these policies continued by the Parliament of Britain. So this was the first consequence. English East India Company, their rule ended. Second one, the rule of Peshwas and the Mughals ended after the 1857. Rule of the Peshwas and the Mughals ended. This was the second consequence. So as we discussed, Bahadur Shah Zafar, which was the leader of the rebellions who took part in a revolt of 1857, it died in 1858 and 1858 in Rangoon. After that, the Mughal Empire ended in India. Mughal Empire ended in India. Same as Peshwas, the death of Baji Rao Peshwa II, it died. After their death in 1856, the Nana Sahib, the adopted son, not considered as a ruler of the Kanpur by the Britishers, and Kanpur annexed under the British Empire. So the rule of Peshwas and the Mughals ended in India. Third one, proclamation of Queen. After the rebel of 1857, by the Queen's proclamation in 1858, other princes of states were assured of their continuity with no more annexation on the pretext of various excuses. So Indian rulers, Indian princes, same as they consider the continuation of their rule without annexation by the Britishers upon their territories. This document signed by the Queen with the all the rulers, rest of the rulers of India, change in policies. Earlier the British policies were there to annex the maximum number of Indian states under the British control. But now Britishers, they changed their policies. They opted a way of a divide and rule policy. They used the divide and rule policies among the such communities which having as the conflicting issues with their neighboring. Next one, reorganization of army. As the Indian sepoys were responsible for the outbreak which we discussed under the military reasons or the immediate reasons responsible for the revolt of 1857. So the Britishers, they decided to reorganize the British army. As the Indian sepoys were responsible for the outbreak of the revolt, the Indian army was now thoroughly reorganized. The number of the Indian soldiers in the army were reduced and the strength of the European soldiers, these were increased by the Britishers. And the last, Indian Civil Services Act of 1861. This act was passed to encourage the entry of more Indians in the Indian civil services. For this, an annual exam can be held in London. It's easy to getting as a consideration from the Indians and their role in administration. That role which earlier played by the British officials in such British posts. They hired the Indians, those educated Indians, and used in a administration. It's easy to implement their such policies which were earlier not considered as the good by the Indians. This was our chapter when people rebelled, the revolt of 1857. Thank you.